The Utah Story Show is brought to you in part by Utah State, home of the Aggies. So living on campus means more sleep, more friends, and better grades because you are not commuting. While others are driving or walking on campus, you're getting those precious extra minutes of sleep. Instead of going home to your mom or your cat, you're hanging out with roommates, neighbors, and friends. So 84% of USU students live away from home, making on-campus housing a community of academic support, peer mentors, friends, and constant activities. For a virtual tour, room details, theme options, and to apply, visit usu.edu/housing. The Utah Stories program is brought to you in part by Curry Pizza. Curry Pizza is awesome. We've been having it at the office. They've been serving Indian food for over 10 years. They opened their first location in a small town called Bicknell. It's a tiny town in southern Utah. And they were serving curry on a pizza because they had to get curry and their whole idea of these sauces into the hands of these small town people. So he said, well, I'll make a pizza shop. And it's just an incredible place. It's owned by a guy named Binda, and he was recently featured on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and he opened a second location in West Valley, Utah. I highly suggest you check it out. It's amazing pizza. The show's also brought to you by Paisley's Grass-Fed Beef. Premium all-natural grass-fed beef delivered right to your door, free anywhere in the state of Utah. It's an awesome new company, and we love their jerky and their steaks, and everything they do is awesome. Visit paisleys.com. That is PAIZLEES.com. Paisley's Grass-Fed Beef, always the right choice. The Utah Story Show is brought to you in part by Legends Pub and Grill. It's locally owned and operated and serving up all your classic favorites and unique originals too. They have amazing burgers, which I absolutely love. Their food is made with real, wholesome, delicious ingredients, awesome appetizers, main dishes like steaks, sandwiches, salads, pizzas, calzones, and now they've got a very special new options for gluten-free and vegetarian folks. Finish off your meal with mouth-watering desserts, plus they have a full bar which offers all sorts of local craft beers. I love their talented bartenders, their tasty creations, and check them out for an upcoming Utah Jazz game or U of U game. It gets rowdy in there, but it's an awesome environment to go check out a game. They recommend you call ahead and reserve space for your group, and they accommodate all ages. They now have 2 locations. Your downtown Salt Lake City location is at 677 South, 200 West, and their new Southtown location is at 10631 South, Holiday Park Drive in Sandy, Utah. We are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Utah Story Show. My name is Richard Markosian. We've got a very exciting guest for us on the show today. It's Chris Bodily. If you know Utah Stories magazine, you will know Chris's work because we feature his stuff all the time. Our current issue is a cover with a guy who's in a mini apartment and he's squatted down and it says housing shortage. It really depicts the housing shortage that we have in Salt Lake City, the problem we have. Chris came up with that illustration and it turned out awesome, so we put it on the cover. And it's a pleasure to have you on. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and before we get into it, I wanted to talk about something that happened 2 weekends ago. It was quite surprising. Kanye West announced with just 3 days notice that he was coming to Salt Lake City. He was going to perform at the Gateway or somewhere in Salt Lake City, and he decided that he was going to perform at the Gateway and bring his Sunday Service band. And I wrote a little story about it, and I found it quite interesting. Do we have the clip of that, Tyler?
Trying to control our minds. He was trying to control our minds through the media, but now it's time
who's sort of an outlier now. He's not following the mainstream media talking points and agenda. He's actually pointing out that Abraham Lincoln was a Republican and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, and you don't have to be a Democrat if you're a black person. He pointed out that he's a free thinker. He thinks more people should be free thinking, and it's something I very much agree with. I think that what tends to happen as you develop into adulthood is people will tell you how to think, how to behave, what to say, and it's really disconcerting because you want to become your own person, but you're developing all of these ideas from your parents and your peers, and I strongly agree that it's a better idea if you become your own person and don't let anybody tell you who or what you need to be. Actually develop your roots and your faith, and Kanye obviously is a big believer in Jesus and Christianity, and I was also at different points in my life, and yeah, Chris, it seems like you haven't had any problem being a free thinker either. Is that been ever a struggle in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I was raised in a very religious household, and but I think part of being in the arts, being a creative person, you kind of have to forge your own path and kind of make decisions for yourself and things like that. So, I feel like one of my primary motivators in life is having my autonomy to make decisions for myself, and so there you go.
And you grew up in Utah, is that right?
Yeah, I grew up in Utah. I went to school at Southern Utah, and I've lived in Ogden for about 7 years now.
And how did you gain your style? Like, not a lot of people are able to have a really distinct style that you have that's not really borrowing it from somebody else, or are you borrowing parts from other people's styles, or how did you develop it?
It's kind of developed over the years. When I was a kid, I watched a lot of cartoons, He-Man, Scooby-Doo. I would watch The Simpsons and kind of draw characters from the show and things like that. But as I got older, I became more emotionally complex, and so I think growing up and all of that emotional complexity kind of worked its way into my work, and so it's you can see kind of those simple roots that I started with the kind of cartoony line work and things like that, but I like to think that it's a little bit more reflective of who I am today.
Mm-hmm. Well, we actually had a animator on the program.
Oh yeah,
last week, and we were trying to discuss like how and why illustration is such a powerful form, and we actually picked up this buried treasure poster that you illustrated the guy, and you just captured the expression in such, I mean, simplistic way, but he has this look of like, wow, what am I gonna do? And the gestures in his hands. I think it's the mouth and the hands that are so difficult to capture right, and it seems like you managed to be able to do that. How did you figure that out, or how did you learn that?
Like they say that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and being able to tell a story with an image, there's you can tap into different ways that people think and different ways that people process information, and it makes it accessible to a wider audience than to just kind of write it down. And so I've always enjoyed drawing and illustration as a medium.
Do you find it's often an exercise of like simplifying everything, trying to find the right line or the right composition just so everything is presented in a very simple form?
Yeah, knowing what to simplify and what to kind of exaggerate or kind of focus on, where you want to draw the viewer's eye, and kind of the composition goes into it and things like that. And so there's a lot of things going on kind of a sub-psychological level that a lot of people don't really think about. But if you can kind of manipulate your viewer to kind of view the image in a certain way, then you've accomplished your task.
Yeah.
So,
And did you have some outstanding art teachers that helped you develop that?
yeah, I had some wonderful professors down at Southern Utah University. I think something that I really enjoyed about my education there is they were really focused on kind of the techniques of things. They didn't tell you how to think or that you had to express yourself in some certain way. They just kind of taught the basics of being able to measure, be able to see, to be able to compose an image and things like that. And so I had some really great professors down there. And like with anything, art is one of those things that you have to continually learn. My whole life, if I become complacent and stagnant, then I'm not going to progress. So you're always learning, and we've got a lot of great artists here locally, so I'm always kind of picking up, looking at other people's art and kind of letting it influence me and inspire me and things like that, and always continuing to try and grow. So.
Yeah, we have a pretty amazing art community here in Utah.
Yeah.
And I went up and visited a guy named Glenn Edwards, who's a professional oil painter. He's been one for. Have you heard of him before?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he taught at Utah State for years, and he's in a gallery in Park City where he sells most of his work. And he was at that time when he was in school and when he taught. He said that there wasn't enough emphasis being taught on foundational drawing skills.
Yeah.
Like really getting down to the nuts and bolts of how you just really render on a piece of paper, just even using something as simple as a pencil, the human form, the human body, hands and gestures, faces. Do you feel like that's not being taught enough in schools anymore?
I'm totally on that same page. I think like a lot of people look at somebody like Picasso and they see the surface end product of what he's doing, and they think, okay, that's the way to become an artist, is just kind of replicate what he's doing. But with somebody like Picasso, he had a traditional foundation. He knew how to render things realistically. He knew how he knew the principles of art and things like that, but he just chose to express himself in a different way. And I think that if you're not kind of taking in all of the aspects, all of those traditional foundation tools, then your work is going to lack the depth that it needs to be something special and something new. So most of my professional work is a little bit more illustrative, a little bit more cartoony and simple and things like that. But when I'm practicing, I do traditional drawing and things like that, drawing from references, drawing from life and things like that. And I think I think ultimately having those foundations add richness to your work.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this, but I actually studied art a lot in high school.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was trying to get into an animation school in California.
Oh, yeah.
And I was thinking I really wanted to be an animator. And so what I was told when I applied to the school was you need to focus on life drawing.
Yeah.
They needed to see that I had the ability going in as I would have as a freshman to be able to create the shape and using contrast and light and line to render the human form, and that was number one. If they saw that you have a talent for that, then they would let you in.
Yeah.
And then I took a class at the community college that was taught by a teacher who learned under a guy named Alvin Gittins, who was at the University of Utah teaching figure painting and portraiture for years. Have you heard of that guy before?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing oil painter. But this guy was a student who taught the class at the community college of Alvin Gittins, and it was like this whole world opened up to me. Like there's so much to know just about capturing likeness, using shapes, coming to shape conclusions, learning about values and charcoal and a scale of values for using charcoal.
Yeah.
And anyway, it just made me realize there is such a greater depth to the craft of becoming an artist than what most people realize.
Yeah, I teach quite a lot. I teach at the Bountiful Davis Art Center, and I teach with Weber Continuing Ed. And even when I'm working with my students and I'm helping them work through the problems, you kind of there's things that I learned years ago, but then they didn't really click for me for a long time. You learn perspective when you're in middle school, and then you do your picture of a railroad tracks going off into the distance and a couple trees that are kind of laying down. And now with doing my graphic novel, I use point perspective for backgrounds all the time. And being able to work through those problems, you realize that there's this. There's centuries of learning and growth that have gone into it that you have access to. So
yeah. Tell me about your graphic novel. Is this the first one you've come out with, or?
Yeah, so I've done some comics for commissioned comics and things like that for movie Hellskate, a movie adaptation of A Telltale Heart, some small kind of comics like that. But this is my first full length graphic novel, my own characters, my own story, and I'm super excited about it.
That sounds awesome. That sounds totally daunting to take that on. How long did it take you to produce it?
I mean, I've been working on it consistently for the last 3 years now. So, and I just finished book 1. It's 250 pages. Jeez. And so I'm thinking that in order to tell the story I want to tell, it's going to take me about 4 books in total. Wow. So that's what I'm aiming for right now. And it kind of came about. Initially, I used to do a challenge, a drawing challenge for Halloween. It was 31 days of Halloween. This is before I knew what Inktober was or anything like that. But one year I was drawing these illustrations, and I thought to myself, if I was drawing 31 pages of a comic, I'd have a 31-page comic by the end of the month. And so I just kind of started working on it, and it kind of evolved into something bigger, and now I'm where I'm at now.
That's crazy. 3 years. So every day for the last 3 years or so?
As a freelance artist, I kind of have to balance my time with a lot of things. I do some teaching. I do a lot of art festivals and Comic-Cons and things like that. And then I also do a good amount of commission work for different clients and things like that. So it's kind of been the project that I've had to fit in around my other work, but yeah, about 3 years now that I've been working on it.
That's awesome. So, and tell me more about your Kickstarter.
So yeah, we're fully funded now. So now it's just if you want a copy of the book, this is a good time to get it, because it's this is when you can get all of the special perks and things like that, the exclusive prints that I've got going along with it. I'm going to have stickers. I'm going to have enamel pins and different upgrades on the different levels and things like that.
Cool.
And it's
I didn't know you already got funded. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we got funded in the first I think 5 days. We got fully funded.
That's great. Was it $80,000? Did you say?
Oh, it was just 15 grand.
Oh, 15 grand. Okay.
Yeah. So
still a lot, man.
And it's still there, and like anything that I make off it from here is just going to go into kind of helping to produce the second book 2, and things like that. So like I think the thing that kind of I was really kind of moved by the amount of people, friends and family and backers that came out to kind of support the campaign and really just kind of share it. And it was it was wonderful, but a little overstimulating how much love I was getting from people. And I just really am appreciative for, how much support I've gotten on this project. So
I think part of it, it's like people see somebody doing something unique and original, and they really appreciate that in Utah. I think it's like, I'm just amazed by Utah stories being able to last this long. I like every month I kind of wonder if this house of cards is just going to collapse, because you're just always blown away that you've got this weird idea, and people are like, wow, yeah, and it resonates with enough people where they're just like, yeah, that should exist. This graphic novel by this independent illustrator should happen.
Yeah.
So I think it's cool.
And it's great because you sometimes don't think about those aspects of things. When you're working on it, I'm at home by myself, just kind of focused on the drawings and the writing and things like that. And I would not be able to make it a reality if it weren't for the community of artists and writers and just people that believed in this project. So
yeah, that's awesome. So it took you 5 days to raise that, did you say?
Yeah.
God, that's amazing. That's really incredible. So you said there's going to be 4 books. So you've already planned this like master plan of how the whole novel is going to progress, and
so Black Lantern, it's kind of a story. It's kind of like this team of paranormal freelance investigators, and they go and solve problems like kill vampires or catch ghosts or things like that. And so there's a tattooed jack-o'-lantern named Edgar, and there's a rockabilly witch named Fiona, and there's a talking black cat named Julius. And so they kind of go on this adventure. There's this priory of warlocks that's looking for Edgar, and so they just kind of are going on this adventure and things like that. And so I think the following books, this first book kind of introduces you to the characters and kind of the world I'm building, and then I can kind of go into the backstory and kind of develop the mystery that's going on as I go along with the rest of the books.
That sounds really cool.
Thanks.
So do you plan on maybe this becoming like a animated cartoon, something like that? Or
I mean, if it did, I'd love that. I try and keep my expectations small and just kind of focus on the work itself, because if I'm trying to plan down the road, I'm not focused at the story itself. And so but I would love to, if somebody wanted to pick it up and make something out of it, I would be all for that. But right now I just want to tell a good story, and I want something that kind of feels like it's my own. Mm-hmm. For a lot of years I've been doing fan art, and I've been doing commission work and things like that. And I wanted something that could be my own intellectual property, kind of tell my unique story, have my own unique vision, and then be able to do products and artwork that goes along with that. So, nice. Stickers and maybe a tarot deck, or like kind of a Ouija board or something like that.
Yeah.
Things that can kind of go with it and really kind of create a brand that represents me.
Cool. So I think one of the most difficult issues when somebody graduates from art school and really wants to make a go of it is how do you create enough streams of revenue and so that you can both pursue your own path and make enough of a living so that you can sustain yourself so you can pursue your own path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Like when I graduated, I had a skill set, and like I had taste, but I kind of didn't know what the next step was for a long time. And like I think I think there's a lot of things. Is one, as an artist, you have to be able to value your time and your talents, right? I think a lot of artists starting out, they kind of undervalue themselves, and so if they're taking commissions that are, if they're using $100 worth of their time to do a project that they're getting paid $25 for, they're losing money trying to pursue this. And so you've got to be able to value your time, be able to avoid spec work and things like that. And then also, as far as like income, it's for a freelancer like me, it's not one single source of income. I've got little trickles everywhere, so every day I'm doing some different kind of job and things like that. And so if one of those little streams dry up, I've got other options to fall back on. And
I think that's critical. Like,
the
problem I think a lot of people get into is you're good at multiple things after you graduate, but of course, as soon as you get in the job market, whoever you're working for is gonna primarily want you to do one thing.
Yeah,
and then you'll develop that skill, but then that thing kind of tends to take you away from your initial passion for why you studied art.
Yeah,
I found that was the case for me. I was like, even back before I was into Utah Stories and I was an independent illustrator, or an artist, I was into storytelling.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I want to use my art to tell stories. And then I was working for a training company for 6 years, and I learned Photoshop, and I learned 3D Studio Max, and I learned animation and Flash was the big tool that everybody was using.
Yeah.
And it was really useful, but I was like, okay, wait a minute. The whole reason I studied this was to tell stories, and I'm not doing that. And do you find that happens to you as well?
And it can be tough because, like you still have to pay the bills and things like that. And so sometimes, but if you're not kind of aware of what your goals are and kind of, what you're doing day to day, it's really easy to just end up using your creativity as somebody else's vehicle for their dreams, right?
Correct, yeah.
And I think, and there's a fair amount of that, like I feel proud of the work that I've done for, the various commissions of people, but you have to kind of remember like you're saying, you have to remember why you got into it. What is your creative voice? What's the story that you want to tell?
Yeah. Feed that fire.
Yeah.
And I kind of find that if you neglect feeding that fire that your passion is based on, you wake up one day and you're like, man, I don't feel like getting out of bed. I don't feel like going to work. I don't want to do this.
And being a freelance artist is not the most stable way to make an income. So if that creative drive dries up, then you're kind of just, you've chosen a career path that's unfulfilling. And, so you've got to, you got to have balance in what you're doing.
The weird situation I found myself in was I got really good at 3D animation and making 3D animated stuff. Then I got into Flash, but then I realized there's this whole back end programming aspect of Flash, and I was interested in coding.
Yeah.
And I learned how to code because I thought, well, what I'm doing isn't really art anyway. And then I found I just kept taking coding jobs. I'm like, well, what am I doing? It's just because it was paying the highest amount I could earn. And
that exists in other realms too. Like my brother-in-law is an engineer, and so like he's a design engineer, and he ended up getting a bunch of jobs as a mechanical engineer, and he's like, that's not the same thing, and I think it exists for all kind of realms, but just because as an artist, just because you can do something doesn't mean that that's necessarily what your focus and interest is. So
and there's so many technical aspects to art these days. Like if you're talking to someone who's just a layout artist, there are so many technicalities of like InDesign, Adobe InDesign to learn, and then the same thing goes for Flash, like just learning the ins and outs of the timeline and ActionScript. And didn't you used to teach Flash too?
Yeah, I taught Flash at Southern Utah University, and for a while, when I graduated college, I thought I was going to be the next Homestar runner and do cartoons and sell merchandise with it and stuff like that. But kind of with the advent of the iPhone, Flash has kind of become obsolete a little bit, because you can't watch Flash animation on your phone. And so I even made a little flash game for the comic book, and nobody's seen it because it's it's on Flash. So
the whole first version of UtahStories.com was entirely Flash. Because that's what I knew and that's what I liked. And
I learned a lot of skills of how I designed my first website with completely in Flash. And then one day I realized that nobody was seeing it because it wasn't compatible
because
with the
Steve
phone.
Jobs didn't like Adobe because they didn't support the Mac in their early days. Did you know that's why it is?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs just like, oh yeah, you're Adobe. Yeah, you didn't make Adobe Photoshop for the Mac until 2 years after you came out with your program. Screw you guys. I'm not supporting Flash. That's what it was. It was entirely Steve Jobs.
And I'm pretty traditional as far as like the mediums I use. I still use Photoshop for most of my coloring and things like that, but most of what I do now is just pen and ink, paper, things like that. So in a lot of ways I'm kind of obsolete in a lot of the kind of forward motion of where art is going, but
I actually think that's more of a asset than a liability. Because if you can make a living with a paper and a pen, then you don't have to spend a shitload of money on the next computer, the next program, always be going to the conferences and all that stuff.
Yeah. And that's something I take solace in, is that like I'm always going to have my skill set. Even if I lost my hand, I could train myself to draw with my other hand. I've always got that skill set with me, and so that's a comfort, is knowing that everything I learned with Flash is now obsolete, but everything I learned as far as drawing on paper, it's going to last me forever.
Yeah. And do you get caught up in like the programs that you're using and things like that at all? Or it doesn't even matter now?
I built my career. I had a cheap version of Photoshop that I got from the university, and I use social media to kind of build my following and things like that. But nowadays I'm kind of the more I get away from technology and things like that, the more I feel like myself, And so I've been doing a lot more drawing that just I'm taking my time on, just kind of focusing on, and then just kind of tuning out all of the noise, So
you try to see how long you can go without turning on your computer.
Yeah,
I like that too, actually.
Well, and like for me, social media feels like an extension of the computer, type thing, and it's so easy to, if you work on a project and you post it on Instagram and you only get like 300 likes on it, you're like, well, is this a terrible piece? Is it, am I?
300, we get like 30 likes on a lot of our posts.
And that's another thing. It's like it's like a drug, the more you get, you're like, like now if I post something that gets less than 1,000 likes, then I'm like, is something wrong with me? Nothing's wrong with me. It's like the algorithm, there's like a million different factors and things like that, and it's a tool like anything else. You can use it to connect with people. Like I said, I really use social media to kind of build my career, but I think
and Instagram's your main tool.
Yeah, nowadays I think it's very visual based and things like that. Something like Facebook, I have more personal friends, whereas on Instagram I have a lot more kind of an art community that follows me.
Yeah.
But me in particular, I have kind of an unhealthy relationship with social media. So the more that I can kind of just use it as a tool and leave it there, the happier I ultimately am.
Yeah, one of the reasons I brought up that Kanye thing in the beginning, is he says something to the effect, "Don't let Facebook ruin your life." And I'm like, nice. That's great, Kanye. Because we did an episode about how kids' serotonin levels are now tied to Facebook likes.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're a kid and you got social media and a Facebook account and you're not getting enough likes, you're not getting enough serotonin. And my contention is, why the hell would you want to tie your brain chemistry up to this platform?
That's just advertising to you, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's just using your private data to manipulate you, your brain chemistry, your belief that you have friends, all these friends.
and I feel like a total Luddite, bashing on social media, but like, I needed to kind of tune that out of my life.
It's been measured. The more time you spend on social media, in general, the more depressed you are. And so it's just like, why anybody would let their kids look at it.
Like, full disclosure, I've got bipolar disorder, and so when I'm allowing social media to regulate my moods, that's a very volatile situation. And so and also I feel like I read this interesting book called Breaking Up with Your Phone or something like that. I'd have to find it, the name, but they said it's something like 40,000 hours worth of time on a phone every day across the world, right? That's like years of productivity spent staring at a screen, and I know that they're not just looking at cat videos, all of them, but a great number of it is just kind of like scrolling through a feed.
Sucked in.
Yeah, and I feel like when I'm focused on my work, the actual work, the pen and paper and just kind of drawing, the more I can kind of tune out that noise, the more I feel like I'm being myself and I'm being the artist that I want to be.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, being yourself, because the main problem I see with social media is really the only valid comparison you can make with yourself and what you're doing today is with what you were doing last week or last month or last year. Mm-hmm. That is really the only great comparison and valid comparison you can make as a human individual. When you start comparing yourself to everybody else out there, and you start thinking of your life in terms of all these other people, of course you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
Because there's 1,000 people who are more successful, more wealthy, better looking, more talented than you are.
Yeah.
Generally, maybe fewer than that, but still, you're never going to feel happy about who you are or what you've accomplished unless you're comparing yourself to you at a different time in your life.
Yeah. I'm totally on board with that, because
Yeah, so anyway, I started thinking in those terms when I also go through, we talk a lot about depression on this show because we feel like that's a really undercovered subject, and we know so many people in Utah suffer from depression and suffer from things like bipolar. And so when I find times I'm at my lowest, it's when I'm comparing myself to other people and their careers and what they're doing, and I'm not focusing on my own life.
Yeah.
And so I was reading my own journal, which I hadn't written a journal entry since 2003, but I was like way into it back then.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I was just like formulating my thoughts and articulating the vision and articulating goals and things like that. And I think when you do that, when you really begin to articulate what is my goal and what's going to be my level of productivity on a day-to-day basis to reach that goal, you do what, like you've done, this graphic novel. I mean, you realize it's actually possible.
Yeah, I thank you. I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited with kind of the new direction of, I'm very analog as far as like, I think there's something to have a tangible book in your hand that you can kind of interact with. There's things that you can do with the medium that you can't do on just a digital screen and things like that. And I feel like this is the direction that I want to go with my career is kind of building something that's my own, and so I'm.
So you were super intentional about this whole thing, and
yeah.
Did you find it in the first like 6 months it was extremely hard to pull yourself back to doing it, or did you just have a routine that enabled you to make it happen?
I mean, like I'm kind of obsessed with drawing. I'm constantly drawing. If I go out to a restaurant and there's a placemat I can turn over, I'm drawing on the back of the placemat. So, so when I'm at home, if I draw for work, and then once I get my drawing done for work, then I work on my drawing for me and things like that. And so,
do you draw like 8 hours a day?
At least, yeah.
Wow, really?
I draw every day, and sometimes when I'm working on just kind of commission work or like, the money work and things like that, it feels like I'm not drawing enough. And my wife will be like, "You've been drawing since you woke up this morning. Like, take a break, let's have dinner, and you can work on it tomorrow." So, like it's, some people talk about like having artist block or things like that, but for me, I've never really kind of dealt with that, just because when I'm drawing, I feel like I'm most myself. I feel like I'm most balanced. I feel like I'm most focused. And so I could be in a constant state of drawing, and that's all I need out of life.
Nice. So you're getting all your serotonin just by drawing the shapes and the figures. And the imagination that's stuck in your head.
So so as far as like the project as a whole, I've wanted to do comics ever since I was a kid. I read Chris Ware's Acme Novelty Library when I was a kid, and like I was like, this is brilliant. This is the type of thing I want to do. And
I know I've heard that name before. Chris Ware?
Yeah, he just finished a book that's 16 years in the making. Rusty Brown. I think he's incredible. I think he's the best in the comics industry that you can find. His piece, Jimmy Corrigan, Smartest Boy on Earth. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I have not seen it, but I've heard his name.
So I'm kind of a little obsessed with him. If I could meet one celebrity, it would be Chris Ware, because I love him. Mm-hmm. But anyways, I read his work when I was a kid, and I wanted to do a comic ever since. And I feel like I would start a project, and then kind of seeing that end goal of saying like, oh, like I want it to become this thing down the road, it would overwhelm me, and then it would kind of stop me from the progress. And so with Black Lantern, it just kind of started as a improvisational type exercise where I just started drawing it, working on it, and I didn't even plan it to be anything more than just I was working on some drawings for the day. And I think that really helped me to get the project rolling. Is just instead of my mom always used to say the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? Mm-hmm. And so just taking it step by step is how I got to the point in which it, I had something to show for my work. So
yeah, that's very cool. I had a couple meetings with a guy who wrote books, and I've always just found it so daunting to write a book, and I've started writing one, and but it's like I got out of the momentum, mm-hmm. and I stopped doing it because I got to sort of a blocked point where I didn't know where to go past that. and then I got bogged down with it, so I never got back to it. You didn't find that was happening within the process of you working on this?
I mean, not so much. If I was stuck on the graphic novel itself for any reason, I had other projects that I could continue kind of working those muscles of drawing and things like that. But then, so I'm not getting rusty, but I can take kind of a break from that particular thing. So, and my wife, she calls them artist dates, and having something that kind of is an outlet outside of drawing also is kind of useful, like going rock climbing or going on a hike or something like that too. You're still allowed to kind of think and explore, in that kind of right brain mindset. But you're in a different context where you don't have your project right in front of you, kind of like,
She calls them artist dates.
Yeah, artist dates, kind of
like keep the wheels turning while you're doing whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, having some kind of outlet that kind of kind of allows you to rejuvenate yourself a little bit.
I absolutely require that with the mountains and my dogs. And anybody who follows us on Instagram can see that I do that as every chance I get. It's just my dogs in this setting, especially the way it is right now, just the leaves are on fire, just beautiful leaves everywhere. We can just drive 10 minutes up to Mill Creek and
we just drove up the canyon this last Sunday, and just it's beautiful up there.
I absolutely love it. And Scamps is down here at my feet, so I'm having to sit all weird. I can't get comfortable. Scamps, can you get up, please? Can you move over? Good girl.
I think you've had those dogs as long as I've known you, right?
Well, here's the thing. This is our two other dogs, Keeks and Louie. They both passed away. Oh. And we were so heartbroken, we didn't know what to do. It's like Louie was my Irish setter. We adopted him when he was 7. He was a rescue. Yeah. And he just followed me everywhere I went, looked at me for any and all sorts of entertainment and fun. Like I was his source of life. and then I just came to just totally depend on having him around. Yeah. And then when he died, it was like, God, what can I do? Yeah. And it was so heartbreaking. And because we only had him 5 years, he lived to be 12. We got him when he was 7, and so it's just like my wife's like, well, there's Irish setter puppies in West Valley. And I was like, no way, I can't do it. And then she said, well, let's just go look at him. And then I was like, okay, but before we go look at him, what's the criteria by which we will not adopt one? I mean, what is the dog's are they gonna have to like come over, pee on my leg and start scratching me and bark? I mean, of course we'll adopt one if we're gonna go look at him. And so we adopted another Irish setter, and then our old golden retriever Keeks died, and that was extremely heartbreaking too. And so we got another golden retriever.
Yeah, like working from home. My cats are always there. I see more of my cats than I do of my wife, and if you're not an animal person, you don't get it. But like pets are, they're But I based one of the characters in my graphic novel around my cat Darwin. Really? So
they just occupy a place in your heart.
Yeah.
And I think if you're like us, we don't have kids yet, and we're in the process of adopting. But it's like that. Those dogs are such a big part of your love of life. Yeah. And if they're gone, you're just. And I'm sure it's the same way with cats. I grew up with cats. I love cats too. And
as big a part as they are of your life, you are their complete life. Yeah. Like you are their whole universe. And so, like having something that depends on you that much, pets are awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't bring them on podcast days, but the way Scamps was looking at me when I was leaving and she thought she was coming, and then I was having to tell her no, I was just like, oh crap, I got to take you. So yeah. So I wanted to ask you too. Do you do any other medium? Do you do oils or acrylics or airbrush or anything like that?
Yeah, I did. I did oils a lot more in college. Like they're messy. So like I don't do as much oils. I do some acrylic painting. I do some. Mostly what I do is pen and pencils when I'm practicing. Most of my professional stuff is pen work, but I do a good deal of pencils nowadays. Like I have a wheel. I'm not a ceramicist by any stretch of the imagination, but I've got a wheel, and so I'll throw a pot every once in a while. And
You ever sculpt?
Yeah, I've got a lot of things that I'm interested in that I'm not like proficient in, so like I just keep them to myself. I do wood burning. I do
Cool.
but they're all just kind of again, they're like an artist date. So if I'm getting bogged down with the drawing, I can kind of just play with some clay or something like that. So
That's cool. I always thought that would be the ultimate life, to wake up and produce whatever kind of art you wanted to do on a particular day.
Yeah.
And the farthest I went with it was I took an oil painting class and started learning oil painting.
Yeah.
But it is like a chore to set up an easel, to set up your palette, to get out the paints and the turpentine, and all that. It's just like so much work.
And if you're painting in your house, your house just smells like turpentine. And like, I was such a messy painter too. When I was in college, I'd have paint running down my arms, and my professor would be mortified. Like, your skin is like an organ, right? Like it's going in your bloodstream. So, But I do love it. There's something about mixing the paints by hand that you don't quite get when you're just using Photoshop, clicking on the little color samples and things like that. So
I love the idea of oil painting. I think it's like awesome if you can get those colors just right to totally mimic what you see in nature. But I can't get. I have an outdoor easel, but I can't get myself to just like take all these paints and all that shit up there and actually start painting.
Yeah. Ceramics too. Like I don't do ceramics nearly as much as I wish, but like there's something about it. Like especially with glazes. You don't know what it's going to look like after it gets out of the kiln. So like the glaze does something that you have no control over. With drawing, every line I lay down, I deliberately put that down, and it's doing exactly what I want it to do. Whereas with some of these other disciplines, you kind of have to release some of that control over the medium, which I think is kind of a fascinating kind of concept.
Yeah, there are so many variables when it comes to painting.
Yeah.
The canvas and how you stretch the canvas, how much that white stuff you put on to prep the canvas. Yeah. I found it pretty daunting, but it was like I had such an appreciation for these great masters.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed it. Well, I think that probably about wraps it up. Did you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah. I mean, if people are interested in the graphic novel, the Kickstarter's going on through until Halloween, and it's just if they're having trouble finding it on Kickstarter, my website is Hat Robot, and they can find it there. And if you want to pre-order a copy, you can grab a copy there. Cool. But I also thanks for having me down here. This is really nice.
I'm so glad you came. I told Connie. I mean, if he's got a graphic novel, have him on the podcast.
And
you're sitting in front of an illustration you did. That's awesome.
Well, I appreciate. I think you asked good questions, thoughtful kind of. It's been a good conversation with you. And, it's good to be here.
Great to talk to you, Chris. Glad to have you down.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on the Utah Stories Show. If you'd like to be a bigger part of the program, go visit utahstories.com and subscribe to our newsletter. Another way you can be a part of it is you can join us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. Those are our 3 social media platforms. We're way more actively involved in YouTube and Instagram than we are any other platforms. And just so you know a little bit about this program, we're into preserving the quality of life we enjoy here in Utah. That pretty much encompasses all of our guests on the program. If that's something you're into as well, then I hope you join us and recommend guests, recommend topics, come with your questions. We're live streaming our episodes every Tuesday at 1:30 on YouTube, so you can join us live. And thanks for being a part of the program. Until next time, this is Richard Markosian signing out.